There are certain things that I would think are more Davante's type game, and yet Tyreek is actually doing better in them.
What's up, GUFF gang? Grown-up fantasy football is back yet again. Oof. Week 12 is in the books. Almost. There's one more game tonight. Joey Marino here with Zach Maziarz and James Reiner. Boys, how do we feel about Week 12? What has happened?
Having fun so far.
And at the same time, not having fun with all the coronavirus cases and everything.
Right, a straight happy medium between all of that. It's been an interesting week, to say the least. But, Zach, what's going on in today's show? What are we doing?
Today's show, Joey, we are entering Showdown Town.
Oh.
Yeah. We are having a showdown again between two heavy hitters this week. Tyreek Hill versus Devonta Adams. This will be good.
And these guys are football players? Is that correct?
I
Dancers.
do believe so. Yes. We can confirm that later on. But yeah, we got a big one today. We got a real big one.
That wasn't in my notes. That wasn't in my notes.
So get excited, Guff Game, because this is going to be a big one. And you know how you can show your excitement? See that little subscribe button down below? If you click on that or tap that, you'd be joining the Guff Gang, which is one of the strongest fantasy football armies on the planet. Don't check that. But you'd be showing how surprised you are at this kind of exciting content that we're bringing you Tuesday to Friday, almost every day of the week. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit the like button. And without further ado, boys, let's get into today's topic.
All right. So like we said, today's topic, a showdown between Tyreek Hill and Devonta Adams. Boys, like we said, this one's going to be fun because both of these receivers have been lights out. We actually have the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 on the season here. All right. So let's start with the facts about Tyreek Hill. He has 68 receptions for 101 targets for 1,021 yards. It's averaging 15 yards per catch and has 13 touchdowns. He's projected to end the season with 99 receptions on 147 targets, 1,485 yards, 15 yards per catch, and 19 touchdowns. And he's currently getting you 20.2 fantasy points per game with 2.35 fantasy points per target. He is our wide receiver 1 on the season. Moving forward to Devonta Adams, he is the wide receiver 2, 74 receptions on 99 targets, 908 receiving yards, 12.3 yards per catch, 11 touchdowns. And he is projected to end the season with 108 receptions on 144 targets, 1,321 yards, 16 touchdowns, and he has 26.3 fantasy points per game for you and averaging 2.34 fantasy points per target. We have two phenomenal wide receivers here, y'all. This is going to be a tough one. I can already feel it. I can feel it just soaking in. But, Joey, why don't you give us your thoughts? Give us your arguments.
Okay. Well, both of these guys are top tier wide receivers. And, you know, it's not like, I think we would be extremely happy if we got either of these two on our team. And especially if you stacked them with either Mahomes or Rodgers. Like we said before in like one of our first videos that the number one wide receiver quarterback stack is going to be Devonta Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And I think we were pretty on the money right there.
You could have stacked, speaking of stacking, Joey, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you could have stacked both of these receivers too. In drafts, you could have easily gotten both of these receivers if you're kind of back half of the draft. So you could have had the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 on the season with that.
Yeah, really. You know, I'm not sure how much there is to argue in favor of each other as opposing to each other because they're both in great offenses and they both have great chemistry with their quarterbacks. The only thing I can say is Tyreek Hill is like the fastest wide receiver in the game, so maybe that gives him an edge. And Davante Adams like literally soaks up almost every target in that offense. Those are my cursory thoughts on the matter. James, what do you think of these two guys?
Two of the best guys in the NFL, doing it at the highest level possible, but they play vastly different styles of wide receiver. Tyreek Hill is a speed guy, big play guy. You can take any catch to the house at any moment. Devonta Adams, probably the best route runner in the league. Always gets open, always gets pummeled with targets, always ends up with the ball somehow. So they both are great players, and they both get it done different ways. Like you said, both in great offenses, both have probably the best and second best quarterback in the league right now, in my opinion. It's going to be tough to compare these two. Zach, any thoughts right off the top?
Yeah, you said it very well, James, with these are two very different play style type receivers. So it really does come down to they both have the opportunity. It's just what do you think is going to translate into more fantasy points? You know, Devonta Adams has so many targets. He's actually number one in the league in target share with 33%. But then on the flip side of that, you have Tyreek Hill. He's got 1,129 air yards on the season and 20 deep targets. So it's basically just like, and he's so quick too that you could game plan around him, but at any point in time he could just drop one for you. If he's he's had a couple of games this season where he hasn't done a whole lot the entire game, and then towards the third, maybe even fourth quarter, he gets a deep ball for a touchdown, saves him a day. He gives you a good 15-point outing. And although that is scary sometimes, he still has been very consistent, and the Chiefs' offense is very consistent, and they don't really play down to their opponents, kind of like the Packers tend to do sometimes too. So I don't know. There's pros and cons for both, I feel like. Same way, Tyreek side, there's other mouths to feed and compete against. On the Chiefs, they have Kelsey, as much as people don't really want to say. They have like Sammy Watkins. They've got two good receiving backs. And then Devonta Adams is basically by himself. Allen Lazard's back, but he's not going to get much of the targets compared to Devonta Adams. He's the go-to guy there. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons on each side. It's going to come down a good bit to what we value the most.
Yeah. Let's talk about their upcoming schedules real quick. So we're at the end of the regular season for fantasy football. So it's only really 1 week left of the regular season, and then we got playoffs. So if you have one of these guys on your team, hopefully there's a good chance you're in the playoffs. So here's their schedules going forward. So Tyreek Hill has Denver, who's ranked 14th against wide receivers next. And then his playoff schedule looks like this. Miami, who's 18th, New Orleans, 9th, Atlanta, 31st, and the Chargers, who are 6th. So that's Tyreek Hill. Devonta Adams has Philly in the regular season, who's ranked 11th against wide receivers. Then his playoff schedule is Detroit, 24th, Carolina, who's 15th, Tennessee, who's 28th, and Chicago, who's 2nd. What do we think of these guys' schedules, and is there a preference looking at upcoming schedules? Since there's so much similar and somewhat dissimilar between these two guys, is the schedule going to be the deciding factor between these guys?
I think both these guys are schedule proof. You play them no matter who you're playing. So I don't know if it makes that much of a difference for either of them. I mean, Devonta Adams against the number one ranked Bears passing defense last week still had a good game. So I don't think it makes that much of a difference. It wouldn't lead into my decision.
Yeah, I agree. These guys are matchup proof. You saw it with Devonta Adams against the Bears defense, a good defense against the receiver, and same way with Tyreek against the Bucs. Like, they're a good defense. They're kind of middle of the road against the receiver, and yet he dropped a 50-plus point game for you. So I don't think either of these schedules really favor one another. I think Devonta has an easier schedule looking at it, though. But yeah, I think you could play against the top 10 defenses against the receiver, both of these wide receivers, and they'd still come out doing well. So,
Yeah, the only thing I would somewhat worry about is kind of what happened to the Packers against the Bucks, where the offense was just completely shut down. Now, granted, I think the only defense on the Packers' schedule would be Chicago, I guess. That would pose a real threat to that offense, but we just saw the Packers eviscerate the Bears on Sunday Night Football. So, yeah, going forward, I don't really see anybody really stopping the Chiefs' offense, and at least on the schedule, I don't see anybody stopping the Packers either. So, and even if it's a bad matchup, you're still going to start them anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say there's certain things that I thought were more, like I know we're talking about like how Tyreek and Devontae are two different type wide receivers. There are certain things that I would think are more Devontae's type game, and yet Tyreek is actually doing better in them. So like red zone targets, he's not doing better in them, but he has 14, whereas Devontae has 15. We think of Devonta Adams as this like big red zone, like end zone hog where he's just getting all the touchdowns. And he only has, 11 touchdowns on the season, whereas Tyreek has 13. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you think, okay, Devontae's got his game, Tyreek's got his game, but Tyreek's kind of bleeding into Devontae's game a little bit too, which helps his ceiling tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those red zone targets are something definitely to pay attention to. Boys, are we ready to make a decision?
I think I've made mine.
Ooh.
I think I have to.
Why don't y'all go ahead then, James? You go first.
Okay. Well,
I know who James is going to pay. This is recency bias.
It is. I have Davante Adams on my team, and I'm going with him for the rest of the season. Now, this is actually interesting because I think Tyreek Hill will have more fantasy points from the rest of the season on, but I think he also has a lower floor. I think Davante Adams gets you a nice 15 each week. I could see Tyreek Hill having a 5-point game a couple weeks. So I think Davante Adams is a safer play. I'd rather have him on my team the rest of the season.
Okay. Zach, what do you think?
I completely agree with James. I'm going Devonta Adams, and like he said, I could see Tyreek Hill. He just dropped 50-plus points this last week for you, so I could see him outscoring Devonta Adams. I don't think it's a huge margin that he would outscore him, but I could see Tyreek having lower-end games. I don't see him having like a 5-point game, but I could see him having a 10, maybe a 12-point game, whereas Devonta Adams, his fantasy points per game is great, and looking at his 20-plus games over the season, he has 5 20-plus point games, and that's with missing some time too. So Tyreek, I think, only had like 2, maybe 3, and he's played the entire season. So I'm just afraid. Tyreek has been a model of consistency, but in playoffs, I would love 20-point games for my receivers as opposed to like a 10 or 14-point, because you get a 10-point game that could lose you a round, and then it doesn't even matter if he scores 50 points the last week of playoffs because you're not in. So,
Yeah, the biggest thing is consistency going forward into the playoffs, like you mentioned. And we've said before, I think on the show, as a comp, Mitchell Trubisky only has eyes for Allen Robinson. And we saw that Sunday night. And it looks like Aaron Rodgers only has eyes for Davante Adams. I think I'm going to have to go with Davante Adams too. I somewhat worry about the offense getting beat, just shut down like they did against the Bucks, but I don't really see Tennessee or Detroit, especially one of those two, maybe Carolina, I don't know, probably not. Any of these defenses really shutting down the Packers offense, and the consistency is there. The injury concern, maybe, I don't know. I don't really want to hedge my bet on that though. So I'd still go with Devonta Adams, but I agree with you both that Tyreek Hill could end up with more points just because that offense is extremely explosive in Kansas City. But I think that's going to do it for today's show. To recap, in the case of Hill versus Adams, the fantasy court ruled in favor of Devonta Adams 3-0. Wow, no love for Tyreek Hill, apparently. But that's the show. We all think both these receivers are great. Feel free to leave a comment below on who you'd rather have rest of season and who you'd like to see in the fantasy arena too, who you have questions about. Send it our way in the comments or tweet it at us at GrownUpFF on Twitter. Be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to go grow up. And be sure to get Guff.